Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football, late Saturday night, capping off what is maybe the most impressive 12-hour stretch of recruiting I've seen in a very long time at the collegiate level. Auburn lands another commitment, flip commitment coming from Antonio Coleman, flipping his commitment back to the Auburn Tigers from Alabama. Antonio Coleman, a familiar name. This is a game wrecker on the inside of a defensive line, and you look at what Auburn's doing on this defensive line. We talked about it earlier today. Yeah, Hugh Freeze is bringing in the talent on the offensive side of the football. I look at this Auburn front seven, specifically the defensive line, over the next 2 to 3 years and say this is going to be one of the better defensive lines, not only in the SEC, but really in the country. When you go back to the 2024 class, guys like Amaris Williams and Malik Blockton and Jamonta Waller. And then you look at the 2025 class and say Malik Autry, Antonio Coleman, two of the better interior defensive linemen that you see in the 2025 class. You add guys like Caleb Falk and guys like Jordan Crawford. I look at Auburn and say they're just stockpiling elite talent on the defensive line. That's what wins you football games in the SEC. That's the recipe to playing elite defense in the SEC. I am fired up for what Auburn is building specifically on the defensive line. Going to get into some of the film on Antonio Coleman. I also want to touch on Blake Woodby, also committing to Auburn, a guy that we've talked a lot about over the last couple of weeks. Before we get into it, as always, just want to say thank you to you guys and to the Auburn fans. We've talked a lot of Auburn football over the last couple of days and weeks. The amount of support y'all continue to show, it truly does mean a lot. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And without further ado, let's get into Antonio Coleman. I first want to start with Antonio Coleman and say this is one of those defensive linemen on the inside that can do so many different things and play so many different roles, right? Antonio Coleman can be the guy that you're going to line up as your nose and just kind of eat up double teams at 6'2", 285. I mean, he plays with low pads. He wins at the line of scrimmage consistently and can be a guy that lets those linebackers and other guys around him be really successful, kind of the role that we think Isaiah Rakes is going to play for Auburn in 2024. That being said, Antonio Coleman can also be one of those game wreckers from the inside of the line, a defensive line that can play that 3-tech position, create a lot of penetration, give you a ton of juice in the pass rush. It's kind of hard to find those kind of defensive linemen that can do both the dirty work, so to speak, not be really productive, but be guys that can eat up double teams and kind of do some of that dirty stuff. But he's also a guy at the same time, if you want to tell him to pin his ears back and get behind the line of scrimmage, get after the quarterback, create penetration, he also can do that too. Now, how does he win? He wins with power in his hands. I mean, this is one of the more powerful defensive linemen that you see in the 2025 cycle. And when you have power, you can build a lot of other aspects around your game. But when you have the ability to just kind of fire out of your stance, low pads, and just put people kind of collapse pockets or get behind the line of scrimmage, move offensive linemen off the football, I mean, that gives you so many other different avenues in which you can start winning. Now, before we get into the film of Antonio Coleman, I want to touch on Blake Woodby again. We've talked about Blake Woodby making it official, committing to Auburn. This is a secondary chess piece, kind of Keontae Scott-ish in terms of he can play the star. He could play the boundary cornerback. Heck, I think he could play a safety role as well. Runs a 10.74 in the 100-meter dash, comes up and tackles phenomenally well. Charles Kelly's going to get to work with a guy like Blake Woodby, probably put him in his best spot. But again, what I love most is you getting a premier athlete that can take away throwing windows exceptionally well, but do so many different things in that Auburn secondary, which is so important when you talk about getting your best guys on the football field. Having someone like Blake Woodby who could play the boundary cornerback spot, could play that nickel spot, could even play a safety spot. It gets easy to get your best football players on the field. Now, getting into back to Antonio Coleman, I want to just start with the power that he has in his hands. And you see him kind of play all over the line of scrimmage, but you see him operate from that zero, from that nose spot on the inside of the defensive line, head up on a center very often. This kid fires out of his stance. He continues to play with glow pads, and he just moves offensive linemen off the line of scrimmage. One of the more powerful athletes that you see in this 2025 cycle. Love the get. I mean, you look at the get off He is the first one off the line of scrimmage every single rep for someone who's 6'2", 285. That is extremely impressive. And then the power that he has in the hands to just absolutely ragdoll opposing offensive linemen, get off blocks, and then show some athleticism in terms of going out and getting the quarterback. You just don't see many guys move like Antonio Coleman does. I mean, this is silly from someone 6'2", 285. Again, when you have the ability to win with power, forcing offensive linemen to really try to punch you and try to prevent you just kind of going right through them, you can start to build off of that game. You see a nice little swim move where we're going to cross the center's face pretty easily. And then again, the closing speed, the ability to go make a play on the quarterback once you're in the backfield, that's really special. Again, you look at the get off. I mean, so disruptive in the run game. When you're trying to run the football and you have a defensive line, I'm going to try to freeze frame it here again. The first one off the line of scrimmage, consistently getting into the backfield and really just blowing up plays. I mean, it is so hard to run the football when you have an interior defensive lineman getting the penetration that Antonio Coleman consistently gets. 30 tackles for a loss as a junior at Saraland. This is a kid that is a game wrecker, but once again, with that 6'2", 285 fire hydrant kind of body, can do some of that dirty work as well. His get off, I don't know if he's reading the snap count or what, and he is so good off the line of scrimmage. You see him deconstructing blocks. I am a massive fan of Antonio Coleman. Now, before we look at the 2025 cycle, something that's really important, how Auburn is recruiting the state of Alabama. Naheem Offord, believe, was on Auburn's campus. Auburn is going to make a run at Naheem Offord. You start scrolling down, Jared Smith trending to Auburn, Malik Autry, Caleb Falk, Eric Winters trending to or committed to Auburn. Zion Grady back on campus for Auburn. Derek Smith might flip his commitment to Auburn. You continue to scroll down and say Auburn, Auburn, Auburn. The state of Alabama right now is absolutely rolling through the Auburn Tigers. That's exactly how, if you're an Auburn fan, you want it to look. You take a look at the 2025 cycle, and again, it is constructed up front. Malik Autry, 6'6", 320 pounds, very similar to Antonio Coleman, where you can be that guy that's going to be the space eater, the two gap, or the guy that eats double teams. But Malik Autry also shows some big time juice in terms of getting off the football and being a penetrator and a game wrecker. You look at Caleb Falk, good genes. We kind of trusted Caleb Falk's going to be a really good edge rusher. Eric Winters, another one of those kind of chess piece safeties, guy that could even play linebacker once he gets to the collegiate level. Jordan Crawford, Blake Woodby. I mean, we are really starting to turn it up in the state of Alabama. I think your top commitments, or your top, five commitments, are all Auburn kids, and hopefully some more on the way with Anquan Fagans and guys like Jared Smith. Hey, look, Auburn's going to get the offensive talent, but what they're doing on the defensive side of the football, not enough people are talking about. We're talking about it. It's going to be special for Auburn over the next couple of years. We'll close it there. Saturday night, late night. Can't thank you guys enough for rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.